We will be talking about the pressure on Russia with our guest. Vyacheslav Potapenko, Deputy Director of the National Institute for Strategic Studies, is already on the line with us. Hello, Vyacheslav.
Good morning.
We will start with the actions of the USA. After all, everyone was waiting for a very long time for this crushing law, and the consideration further in the House of Representatives. And of course, the final say rests with Donald Trump's decision. What are your hopes, relatively speaking, for this law? Well, bill for now. How do you assess its implementation?
Well, Trump managed to tie, so to speak, the sanctions on Russia to the sanctions on Iran. Accordingly, one way or another, different forces in the American Senate were able to find a balance in the end and vote. Now, how should I put it? It's up to the House of Representatives. I think the chances are high that this bill will be passed and signed by President Trump and will go into effect. So, in general, we can talk about, so to speak, pressure on the countries of the global south. I mean, well, it's clear that under the sanctions, besides Russia, China, India, and in general, other countries that were making money on brokering Russian oil are falling. There you go. So this will also include countries of the, so to speak, post-Soviet space that were trading this oil and various other intermediary countries. And first and foremost, it's not countries, but specific firms, specific businessmen who will lose multi-million revenues. Therefore, we can say that in the strategic perspective, after the signing, the flow of revenue to the Russian Federation will decrease significantly, which will affect both the ability to recruit people for the war and production. There you go. But however, this will take, months, right? So by the time they sign it, by the time the flow actually decreases. So it won't be tomorrow. It will be, let's say Russia will feel it in the winter. Yeah, but however, this is overall a serious argument in the negotiation process, which the United States of America continues to moderate, the negotiation process regarding freezing hostilities on the Russian-Ukrainian front, and naturally, the argument about freezing the war in the Persian Gulf. Yeah, therefore, this is a very important story for global security and a certain, so to speak, chance that a hot Third World War will not flare up, but will instead take place in the format of a Cold War, that is, sanctions, trade restrictions, and so on, with isolated short-term combat operations rather than large-scale use of various weapons on many fronts. So, I evaluate this extremely positively. I believe this is a correct and necessary initiative. If the U.S. had passed such a bill under Biden in the fall, when in response to the Russian mobilization in the fall of 2022, then, it's quite possible the Russian-Ukrainian war would have ended back then. Well, it's good that 4 years later, when they themselves faced a shortage of missiles in the Persian Gulf, they finally realized that some steps needed to be taken.
But the United States of America understands, the country's leadership understands that every minute of delay in making certain decisions costs human lives. For example, the Air Force, the defense forces of Ukraine have already reported that as a result of the night attack on Odessa, not a single missile was shot down, which once again confirms that there are no missiles for interception systems. The United States also understands this, but for some reason, everyone is dragging their feet. Is there really still faith in diplomacy?
Well, the only thing they have faith in is diplomacy. Otherwise, no one would be adopting these sanctions, because that is the main argument that is pressuring Russia and forcing it to turn to diplomatic paths instead of storming Kramatorsk. There you go. So, lives? Well, yes. Everyone is interested in lives only in words. But in real life, of course, geopolitical interests often take precedence over humanitarian considerations, unfortunately.
And regarding the fact that Britain is also active with sanctions now, it has introduced new sanctions against Russian banks, companies connected to the military industry, and also vessels in Russia's energy sector. The UK Foreign Office announced this. And so 19 individuals and legal entities have been hit by the restrictions. In addition, sanctions were imposed against 6 tankers that were used for the illegal transport of Russian oil and liquefied natural gas. And Ozon Bank, which belongs to the Ozon marketplace, has also been hit by the restrictions, according to the British government's website. The country's media stated that the new sanctions are aimed at those who are helping Russia continue its war against Ukraine. Let's take a listen.
Every tanker stopped, every bank isolated, every supplier exposed means fewer resources for Russia's war and fewer missiles aimed at Ukrainian cities. Sanctions work, and their consistent application makes such measures even more effective. The only way to stop Russia's genocidal war is to increase pressure on the aggressor. Great Britain continues to set an example. We call on all partners to continue increasing pressure until Russia ends the war and justice is restored. Together, we're stronger. Andriy Sybiha, Acting Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Social Network X.
Vyacheslav, what connects Britain and the Russian Federation, considering that perhaps one of the biggest enemies of the terrorist state is Great Britain? But nevertheless, a lot is tied specifically to this country. Where does such ties come from, and how significant are they? And how, in your opinion, will the imposed sanctions actually have an effect?
Well, Russian business, back when Russia was a relatively democratic country, was generally based in London. We remember the epic trial between Berezovsky and Abramovich in London. We remember that many Russian oligarchs moved there and did so quite successfully. And in 2013, Russians organized an Old New Year celebration in Trafalgar Square. And at that time, there were 250,000 Russians there. And they were all very wealthy people who tried to move their capital specifically to Britain. And they chose London for their residences. Therefore, London has a huge resource for exerting pressure on the Russian Federation, because a significant portion of the money is not in Miami, where Trump's residence is, but specifically in London. Undoubtedly, the situation has changed. Starting in 2014, Putin began calling for capital to be brought back. Some people moved their money to semi-offshore zones, yes, and also to offshore zones of the British Empire, like, the Cayman Islands or the United Arab Emirates. But nevertheless, well, it's not just that well-known restaurateur who often gives interviews sitting in London. Hundreds of thousands of Russian multimillionaires are sitting there. And so Britain has people to impose sanctions on, and it is doing just that. Yeah. Well, regarding distant, long-standing conflicts, that's, the rather complicated question. Well, indeed. When you walk around London, you notice that the British really focus on the Crimean War of 1853 to 56. There's the Alma Bridge and some place called Kacha and monuments. I mean, there are Crimean place names there that even most citizens of Ukraine don't know, but in London, they are very well established as sites of the British Empire's victories. Yeah, but Britain is currently moderating this war, in principle. It has taken on the functions of moderator for the Ramstein Group, which were initially led by the United States of America in 2022, 2023, and 2024. Yeah, it is supplying quite serious weaponry, which is causing, serious damage to the Russian Federation, including on its own territory. And we see that, in general, all visits by the Ukrainian leadership to Washington happen in transit through London. Yeah, we know that our president, members of the royal family have visited us twice in a year. The president has met with the King of Great Britain several times there, and so on. So we understand that right now, the moderation, the coalition building, the, so to speak, lobbying of diplomatic efforts of Ukraine's international efforts are largely being carried out with the support of Britain, which, has a lot of experience, extensive connections, and great capabilities in this matter. The issue is that Britain doesn't have enough money, but they are collecting it from friendly coalition countries such as Canada, Norway, Denmark, which has issues with the States, the Netherlands, and so on. Therefore, Ukraine, well, has support besides the European Union, which is more involved in, so to speak, the civil and humanitarian aspects of the war, while, so to speak, the military ones, well, are handled by Britain. This is very important. This is, well, sort of obvious. And I understand that even in the event that some real negotiations take place, it won't just be the European Union present there, but Britain as well. I mean, if there are any real negotiations with the Russian Federation without the participation of the British side, I think they simply wouldn't even make any sense as such. There. So that's the situation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vyacheslav, for finding the time to join our broadcast. Vyacheslav Potapenko, Deputy Director of the National Institute for Strategic Studies, was with us on the line.